session 3 in a series of 4 sessions, right? So without much ado, I will start with asking Kirk to do the land acknowledgement, and then we'll begin.
Yeah. Well, hello everyone. I'm Kirk Neergarth, and I teach history here. And I come from a place a few thousand clicks to the east, and out there, the Crown's got a long history of using treaties as cover for colonial violence and Aboriginal dispossession. There was no way of knowing that in 1877 when the Indigenous nations of this place gathered at Blackfoot Crossing, signed an agreement in words and ceremony that promised peace and friendship. So that was the promises made, and the promises weren't kept. Instead of that alliance, settlers have dishonored the treaty in the time since. And I think in spite of their worst efforts, Indigenous nations of this place, the Kainai, the Piikani, the Siksika, the Chiniki, the Bearspaw, the Goodstoney, the Tsuut'ina, Métis, and Cree nations, they persist, they're resilient, and they're resurgent, and they have millennia of knowledge about how to live in this place in a good way. And so settlers like me have a lot of work to do and a lot to learn, and my children after me, to try and rebuild trust and rebuild relationships, to live according to the promises of the treaty and peace and friendship. And so we have to learn to our history, and that's teaching that history is my contribution to trying to have a better present and a better future with First Nations allies. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kirk. Thanks for that, right? So we will begin our day with Anupam, right? I'll very quickly introduce Anupam, who's a professor of economics in the Department of Economics, Justice, and Policy Studies, served as Vice President of Negotiations for the MRFA from 2019 to 21, and currently he's serving as the Vice Chair of the MRFA Negotiating Committee.
Is that right, please? Okay, all right. Thanks, Navneet, and thank you everyone who is here or online. My name is Anupam Das. I teach economics, and I am currently serving as the Vice Chair of the bargaining team of the MRFA, and previously I was in 2 other rounds of collective bargaining. So I'm gonna talk about, I think I have about 8 or 10 minutes. I'm gonna talk about 3 specific things, very much related to Mount Royal University. So the first thing I'll discuss is the Article 13. You all know about Article 13. It's in our collective agreement. This is the article which talks about our salary schedule, grid steps, salary administration. It also gives a few other things like long service increments. It talks about universities' kind of right to give salaries beyond what's in the grid steps and so on and so forth. So I'll talk briefly about that. I will then discuss how our colleagues at MRU, our, of course, faculty colleagues are doing in terms of salary compared to other post-secondary institutions in Alberta. I'll share some data with you. And then I'll also talk about how we are doing when we are thinking of the recent inflation, which has been quite unprecedented. We have not seen such high inflation rate in the last couple of decades. So I want to talk about where we are when we compare our salary and inflation and so on and so forth. All right, so let's start with Article 13. As I mentioned, Article 13 is the salary schedule and salary administration article. So this is a snapshot that I took from this article. It not only, of course, this is for full-time assistant professors, associate professors, and full professors, but this article also gives the salary schedule for lab instructors, for senior lecturers, contract employees, and so basically all faculty employees. So you can see that for assistant professor, associate professors, there are 14 steps. For full professor, I believe there are 13 steps. There are also 7 steps for lab instructors and senior lecturers, and 6 steps for contract faculty. Now, when you look at these grid steps, so one is higher than the last one, right? So the difference in salary is approximately 3.3% for everyone, right? It's about 3.3%. Now, right off the bat, I want to tell this to all of you that this increase has nothing to do with inflation. This is not a cost of living adjustment. This increase in salary from one step to another is because of our performance, because of the experience that we gain by working in this place, right? So we need to be mindful of that this increase in salary is because of all those experience that we gain from working here. What else? So Article 13 also discusses few other things. As I mentioned previously, it talks about long service increments. So our colleagues who have been here for 20 years or 25 years, they get certain long service increments. So every time, or at least in recent years, whenever we saw some increase in our nominal wage or nominal salary, we also saw some increase in the long service increments as well. So long service increments are really merely to recognize the faculty members who have been here for a long period of time. But I should mention that this is only for full-time employees. So contract employees who have been here for a long period of time do not, unfortunately, receive that long service increments. Now, Article 13.4.1 talks about, I think it says it's called salary administration other. So it talks about other issues related to salary. It says that the university or the board can pay salary above the rates stipulated in Article 13, and it's mostly because of special qualifications or other reasons. Sometimes we call them market supplements, sometimes we call them market modifier. So this article actually allows the university to give additional salary to faculty members. I don't have the data right at this point, but I don't think that there are many faculty members who receive market supplements, but there are some faculty members who receive some form of market modifier. All right, so in the next 3 slides, I'm gonna give you a salary comparison across different post-secondary institutions in Alberta. So we have University of Alberta, U of C, U of L, McEwan, and us. Now, these are all publicly available data. You can get those from Statistics Canada. If you just Google faculty salary, you will be able to get some table, and you can prepare a table like this. Before I go into these details, we need to remember that there are some caveats, right? These are mean salary. That means these are average salary. It's not any individual salary. Now, what this number gives us an overall idea of where we stand, okay? But we need to analyze these numbers carefully, because I'll give you one example. If suddenly in a year we hire more assistant professors at a lower grade step, let's say $80,000, I'm just making up this number, then we will see that our average salary for assistant professor will probably go down. But on the other hand, if another year we are hire more assistant professors with more experience, so they start at, let's say, grade step 12, then our average salary might go up. Whatever, if we look at this number, we see that since 2018 to 2023, which is the last round, where are we standing? So we are number 4 out of these 5 universities in most cases. All right, so our average assistant professor salary is about $95,500. Now, some people might argue that, well, University of Alberta, University of Calgary, these are so-called big universities. They are more research focused. It's not surprising that they have higher salaries. I have a few comments about that, and that's absolutely my personal opinion, and just by looking at the data. Number one is that we are somewhere at par with McEwan. Unfortunately, McEwan still has a little bit more salary than us on average, right, for assistant professors in 22-23. But we need to also understand, by the way, the University of Lethbridge has significantly higher average salary, $102,000 as opposed to 95.5. We need to understand that Calgary is also a more expensive city in Alberta. So our consumer price index, which represents the variable to calculate inflation, is typically higher than 2 other big cities like Edmonton and Lethbridge, right? So yes, University of Calgary's salary is expected to be higher, but we should be somewhere at par when we talk about purchasing power. As an economist, when I think of salary, the first thing that comes to my mind is how many goods and services I can buy with that salary. That's my purchasing power, right? So I would argue that even if we are at par with McEwan, but in real purchasing power term, we are not actually doing as good as other universities, PSIs in Alberta, at least for assistant professors. Just quickly, associate professors, again, we are number 4 in 2022, 2023. On average, our associate professor salary is slightly higher than McEwan, but lower than other 3 PSIs in Alberta. That has been the case over a period of time as well. And finally, for full professors, again, we see that average salary for us is number 4, higher than McEwan, but lower than other 3 universities. You'll see that, for full professors, the absolute amount of these mean salaries is bigger. It's not surprising because people who are full professor are more likely to spend more years at universities. All right. Let's talk about, now, of course, these are mean salaries. It does not give us a clear picture of how we are doing. So I am more interested to look at our salary growth and how we are doing compared to the inflation growth. Now, again, whenever we analyze data, we should always give some disclosure that it depends on how we see data, right? Inflation, all these numbers will change if we change the time period. So I want to tell you, before I go into this table, how I created this table, okay? So I looked at the month of a year where we actually got an increase, and I also looked at the corresponding inflation for that particular period. So for example, 2018, 2019, we did not get any increase, so our salary growth was 0%. But average yearly income of average yearly increase in price, which is inflation, year-to-year inflation at that time, was 2.03%. Okay, what does that mean? It means that if you just take a snapshot of that period, that year, we actually lost our real income by about 2%. Same thing is true for 2019, 2020. We lost our real income by about 1.27%, and so on and so forth. You see, 2021, 22, that's the period when inflation started kicking in after the first or couple of phases of COVID. And then, of course, 22, 23, that's when, there were months when our inflation, Calgary's inflation went up to as high as, I believe, 10%. It hit 2-digit inflation. Average inflation was 22, 23 was 6.24. You will notice that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In row 5, instead of July to June, I took July to March. That's because it's the April 1 when we actually got our first increase in salary in a very long time, right? So that's when we saw 1.25% increase. It's good news. My friend Kurt worked hard to get us that 1.25% increase. Unfortunately, that was also the period when we saw a 3.6% increase of inflation, right? So even though we did see some increase in our nominal wage, but in real term, we lost income, which is basically the difference between these two numbers. Then after a few months, in December, we saw another increase of 1.5%, but in December, Statistics Canada reported that Calgary's inflation was 4%. Now, after December, things are kind of vague. We thought we would get 0.5% in 0.5%, right? We thought we might get 0.5% increase. The government has not announced anything officially. The budget was announced a few days ago. We are not sure. I'll say we are not sure if we actually hit that targeted GDP growth that the government promised would give us 0.5%. Regardless, even if we get 0.5%, inflation has still been high, right? So throughout this January, February, we are still losing income. So that's what's happening for us, Mount Royal. Now, I should be clear that this is also the case for other PSIs. The other PSIs since 2018 got either exactly the same kind of increase or very similar. So we are not alone here in this unpleasant time. Okay, now I encourage all of you to actually go through this website. It's a QP, Canadian Union of Public Employees website. They give this fascinating link where they actually created a calculator, and you put your salary, a few years ago, and if you put your salary today, I don't want to go into the technical details. I did go through the technical details. They use 3% as compound interest rate and so on and so forth. But you can actually see how much salary we lost over a certain period of time. So last night, I was creating some small simulations just to give you an idea where we are at. So I took assistant professor step 7 as an example, because step 7 is somewhere in the middle, right? So assistant professor step 7 had $89,603 according to our 2018 collective agreement. That was the salary. In November 2023, that salary went up after all those 1.5 and 1.25 and those 1% increase. We saw that it was $90,723. The loss of real income was $15,000. It means that had we kept up with inflation since 2018, in November 2023, we would have had an additional approximately $15,000, someone who was at assistant professor step 7. Again, please note that I excluded the grid step increase because, as I mentioned, grid step increase are not related to cost of living adjustment. For an associate professor step 7, the loss will be about $17,500. I also took associate professor step 14, which is the top grade of associate professor level 3 with PhD, doctoral degree and all. The reason is that we have a large group of faculty members who are at the top of the grid of associate professor level. So their salary was $132,000 approximately, went up to 133.5 in 2023 November, and the loss of income was about $22,500 during that period. For a full professor step 10, somewhere in the middle, the loss was $24,000. Okay, so what we have been seeing is that there is a huge loss. And by the way, that amount I just showed you, 14,000, 22,000, is approximately 16.53% loss of real income over that, how many, like 5 years period, right? So, and again, these are, I did calculate some of these based on my understanding of our collective agreement, but I also cross-checked with QP's calculator. We came really, really close. Like the difference was 0.3% or something, right? So our loss of real income was 16%, 17% over the last few years. Now, is it just the case for us? Absolutely no. It's the case for other PSIs in Alberta. It's the case for other public employees or nurses. And not surprisingly, unions' reactions have been pretty strong. If you have been following the news in the last 2 weeks, you will see that, by the way, all public employees unions are actually at the bargaining table right now. And some of them publicly shared their initial proposal, the government's initial proposal, and you will see that UNA, United Nurses Associations, one of the largest unions here, started their bargaining with a 25% increase in salary in year 1. AUP, I believe AUP is the largest union in Alberta. Their starting proposal was, I think about 13% in year 1, 10% in year 2, And by the way, in addition to that, they also want COLA adjustment, cost of living adjustment, right? I don't think that UNA included COLA, and that's why their ask was much higher than AUP, right? So and recently, I think just earlier, last week, Alberta Federation of Labor president, is that Gil McGowan? Yeah, he was giving a talk at CBC, and he said that the government should take the union workers really seriously right now, because people are suffering due to this large increase in inflation, and a level of inflation that we did not see in a very long time, right? So we see that unions have had some strong reactions to the loss of income due to cost of living increase. I'm gonna finish my presentation, but this is something came from Chantel. The MRFA office wants to share your story. MRFA office wants to compile some audio files, and you, if you are willing, please use that QR code or that link. You can tell your story, how you are impacted because of this inflation, and what are the sufferings that we all have been going through. And then MRFA will compile a story. Of course, your names will not be used. I think Chantal did mention that, however, the voice can be recognized, so be mindful of that. And then that story, I think MRFA plans to share it with the board's team to strengthen MRFA's position at bargaining. So thank you all. Thanks for listening to me. I know I do not have lots of good news to share right now, but it is what it is. And it is not good news for workers who are operating under collective agreements, because we have not seen a significant increase in nominal wage over the last few years. I'll be happy to take questions after other presenters are done. Thank you.
Those were some really eye-opening stats, right? Next is Kirk, who's a historian in the Department of Humanities and has served as Vice President of Negotiations for the MRFA from 2021 to 2023. Just bring this up. Okay, there you go.
Okay, I have some good news to share after Anupam. That unions across the country have been responding to the prolonged inflation. Can't call it a spike, given how long it's been prolonged high inflation, and have been having some success recently, winning back some of the earning power lost over the last 3 years. And so I'm going to talk about the national labor patterns, and then I'm going to talk more specifically about the PSE sector, and then with some special caveat for PSE in Alberta. So what you can see here, thanks to Statistics Canada, which keeps track of collective agreements. So this is both private sector and public sector workers, that there has been, particularly at the end of 2023, some wage settlements with significant increases. And when you see that the blue column here over Q3 is quite a bit higher than the orangey column, that's because that first year settlements are to try and make up for lost wages over the course of inflation. So you can see that the increases for agreements signed in the third quarter of 2023 have a first year above 6% on average. And then average over the course of the agreement, they're at 4.7%. It breaks out a bit differently between unions in the private sector and in the public sector. So for the year 2023, The average annual increase in collective agreements signed in the private sector has been 5.3%, whereas 4.4% for the public sector. Now, these increases are not universally spread across the economy. So TD Economics has used Stats Canada data to produce this chart. And this shows just where the increases over the last year have been. So you can see it's not necessarily in unionized sectors where the biggest wage increases have been. This massive increase for wages in agriculture, almost 10% a year, is in a sector that has almost no union presence. Also in the resources sectors, forest, fishery, mining, oil and gases, you've got increases of about 8%. They've got relatively low union penetration. But you can see in highly unionized sectors like public administration and education, you're still seeing increases around 4% a year, which is in keeping with the kind of national pattern of wage increases as a whole. So after adjusting for these kind of contracts that have big first years, looking at the average wage changes for workers in Canada, TD Economics has calculated that 2023 saw an on average 4.1% increase for workers in Canada. And that's a level that hasn't been exceeded since the very early 90s. And it's just a little bit of ahead of where increases were in 2007. And if you look at this chart, you can really see the long period of low increases, but it was also a period of low inflation. And as inflation has spiked after 2022, correspondingly, workers are having increases in wages. But these levels of wages with 4.1% on average nationally is not really reflected in the post-secondary education sector, according to CAUT data, which keeps track of all collective agreements in the post-secondary sector. So this chart is a little hard to see the numbers for you, but the two lines, CAUT separates their data. The red or orange line is regular academic staff and limited term appointments, whereas they call the blue line casual academic staff. So I think in the MRFA context, this would be the distinction between full-time and contract faculty. So as you can see, there is an increase in these collective agreements in 2023, but it's closer to 2.5%. And the largest raise was for casual academic staff in 2022 of 3.5%. And for full-time staff, the wages settlement on average is closer to 2%. If you take those and you just look at the 5-year period on average, for regular academic staff, it's an average of 1.75% per year since 2019, or the 5 years, 2019 to 2024, and a little bit higher, 2.4% per year for casual academic staff. But even this is kind of misleading because those numbers are pulled up with agreements that are recently signed that are covering particularly the years 2022 and 2023. And this is especially the case for British Columbia universities, where British Columbia universities, they bargain sectorally, and then they negotiate at the institutional level. And so most BC universities will have a pattern that is in wages, very similar to what Thompson Rivers has, and this is on the British Columbia Labor Ministry's record of collective agreements. So you can see that their agreement expired in March of 2022, but most of these agreements were ratified in the spring of 2023, i.e. in the spring of last year. And so the pattern across BC universities is a retroactive raise, if you ratify in the spring of 2023, of 3.24%, a raise in the spring of last year of 5.5%, and then another raise coming in just a month or so of 2%. So you have about an average of 3.5% per year for regular academic staff at BC universities. And so those pulled the national numbers that I was showing you upwards. Pulling them in the opposite direction are post-secondary increases. And the scale makes this look like this is a big wage, but this is the average for Alberta PAC workers between 2019 and 2024. And you can see that this is about an average of 0.5% a year. Now, why are we so much below the national average? Partly it's timing. So the contracts that we are currently renegotiating were negotiated in a period when, for most of the period of negotiation, there was low inflation. And then you had COVID, you had a government demanding rollbacks. And then when the agreements were ratified, you had inflation taking off, but the duration and the scale of that inflationary spike had not yet become obvious. But I think it's also to do, and quite profoundly to do, with the way negotiations happen in Alberta. And that is with significant government intervention in public sector bargaining. In February of this year, there was this report released by the Parkland Institute, but it's by scholars from Athabasca University, at least one of whom was directly involved as the chief negotiator for Athabasca in the last round. And this report lays out the degree to which the Alberta legislative landscape is different than other jurisdictions in the country. The way that this entity, the PCBO, which is this government entity, tries to coordinate public sector bargaining and in fact limits the ability of employers in the post-secondary sector to go outside of these secret and imposed mandates. And so once you had settlements in the fall of 2021 with AUPE, and then in the December with the nurses, the pattern of bargaining was established that set the situation across the sector. And this particular circumstance is something that the negotiating team is going to have to deal with again in this round. Thank you for your attention, and I too will take questions at the end.
Okay. Guys got a bit of a biography here, so we'll go through that. So Guy grew up in the small town of Wakefield, Quebec, and at the age of 11, he attended the National Ballet School of Canada before turning to music studies at the Conservatory of Music in Gatineau, Quebec. His undergraduate degree at the University of Ottawa included studies in music composition and theory. He went on to complete a master's degree in music theory from U of T and a PhD in music from University of California at San Diego. He began teaching at Mount Royal College in 2008 in the Department of Theater, Speech, and Music Performance. And it's in 2013 that he moved to Gen Ed, where he currently coordinates Cluster 2, teaches music and aesthetics. So he served as the contract rep on the MRFA executive board from 2015 to 19, where he sat on the team negotiating the 2018 collective agreement, and he's currently the negotiating officer on the MRFA executive board.
Thank you so much for that introduction.
It's wonderful, I think, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I don't know if
From current slide.
I just from current slide. There we go.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk, or I was given the task of talking about this pro rata model for compensation, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about benefits. So the basic idea around the pro rata model is a kind of a prorated wage, whereby you are engaging with the principle of equal work for equal pay. And the idea of equal work for equal pay is, of course, to limit the university's use of contract academic staff to make up for budgetary issues, and to instead to try and curb that usage, to try and get a greater complement of full-time academics who are properly supported in their research, teaching, and so on. The pro rata model, as here is quite simply defined. It just means that we compensate part-time work as a percentage of full-time work. And yeah, this is how we restore the integrity of scholarly work. The pursuit of new knowledge and the dissemination through teaching, publication, professional practice, and other creative endeavors. So that's the Canadian Association of University Teachers. This is the ideal way of dealing with the issue of contract academic staff, which is not just here at MRU, it's of course nationally and internationally in the States as well. I'm not sure about other countries. So how do we think about pro rata? How did I think about pro rata here? Well, our collective agreement doesn't exactly say what you are being paid for as a full-time professor. So the way I imagined it here was, think of a teaching service position, so not a TSS. So you're teaching 8 courses a year, and we'll take 20% of that time, and we'll say that's going to be your scholarship, your service time. So then we take 80% of that, of your annual salary, and we use that ratio to establish what a 48-sit course is worth. So I did that, and I did it with various different things. I look back at collective agreements going back to 2006, and just sort of looked at the relationship between what if we do that, and what if we compare that to what actually gets paid to contract faculty. So if you go back to 2006 on this slide, so series 3 here, the green at the very bottom, is the sort of the middle range, what you would make at the middle range of the contract faculty grid. And I guess this is not very great with all these colors, but series 1, which is the second from the top here, the sort of darker blue, that is what a full-time faculty would be making per course using this 80-20 model that I did. And that was, I did that right in the center of the grid with the associate, right in the center of the associate prof grid, so around step 7. And then the orange line, that's the full professor, so that's the absolute top of the grid. And the light blue line, that's the absolute top of the contract faculty grid.
Okay, and I compared, so you compared what's happened over time. And you can see that back in 2006, the difference between an associate professor and a contract faculty at the top was actually quite close on a pro rata model. But then once you get to around 2010, there's this great leap away from any kind of parity. And that's, of course, the year that we became a university and established the grids that we're still dealing with now. So at that point, we saw this massive leap for the full-time faculty, and of course, pretty much nothing for the contract academic staff. And that has pretty much gone on following that trend over the past few years. Over the 10 following years, actually 13. There are a couple times when we have negotiated increases specifically to the contract faculty grid to try and change this ratio, but you can see we're still quite far away from each other. And what this essentially does is devalues the work that we do. I looked at the ratio in time. So this was the high-end ratio in time. So like the top of the contract grid and the full professor grid. And you can see there was a spike to where basically we were paying the full professor at the top twice as much as what we would pay contract faculty. And then it's sort of slowly come down to what is 1.9. So still pretty much twice over time. But if you go back to 2006, even though at that top of the grid where we find the greatest disparity, because systems usually tend to support the highest end, the greatest disparity at the top was only 1.65 in 2006. So it was better. If you look at the low end, the situation in 2006, we actually had parity at 1.01 using that same calculation. And then at the spike, when we became a university, it went up to 1.3. And as slowly through certain measures, especially in the last round, thank you very much, Kirk, again, we are now at we've gone from 1.25 to 1.24. So that's the situation that we're dealing with here in particular. And that's what we're going to try and correct with a pro rata model. Okay, so I'll take questions on pro rata later. I'm going to talk a little bit about benefits. I was asked to talk about. So there are a lot of monies in the agreement that we consider to be benefits, which don't actually land in the benefits article, Article 16. Some of these do actually, but the benefits that people normally think about when they think about benefits are health benefits. These are some other benefits that we find in the agreement. So I call them non-benefits benefits, non-benefits in quotes benefits. And so I looked at these again because the university has really been growing. So I looked at these longitudinally, how they've been changing over time. One of the biggest ones is List A here, which is, these are in thousands. So List A is currently $500,000, which is distributed per capita for faculties. And that's up from 150 in 2008 and 405 in 2014. So that's Article 14.9. That's where you get a lot of reassigned time for research and scholarly endeavors, apparently for updating your teaching practice as well, departmental reviews and so on, things like that. So that's been pretty stable since 2014, but we have, of course, grown quite a lot as a university since then. The coordination funding, this is the $700,000, which goes to coordination. in the university. So it's really kind of the administration of the university that has actually stayed exactly the same since 2010, that $700,000. So, and we don't get reports on exactly how that's used. So we don't know exactly, but the university has clearly grown since 2010. So we would probably want to see that, that fund go up as well. The reassigned time for counselors and educational developers and librarians is basically was a list A that was devoted to counselors and educational developers and librarians. That is $44,000, and that has been exactly the same since 2010. We don't get substantive reports on that, how that is utilized either. So we're looking to get a little more information on that. The contract service honorarium, this is $20,000, which has been the same since 2016. This is monies that contract faculty can apply to on a first come, first served basis to get compensation for the kind of service work that they're asked to do, or that they want to do, or that they do. Again, that hasn't changed, even though our faculty complement and presumably service work has gone up since 2016. Scholarships for dependents, that is $60,000, which is given to people who have dependents going to our university, and within a few months after the end of classes, it gets distributed, and that's been the same since 2010. So clearly tuition has gone up since 2010. Clearly the faculty complement has gone up since 2010. So this fund has just become very, very small for people looking for that particular benefit. The FDC funds, that is the $350,000 distributed to faculties that we apply for on a kind of quarterly basis to support research and scholarship. That too was $315 in 2008. So we haven't seen a lot of growth in that fund either over time. The employee credit course reimbursements, that's $64,000. That's for people who are actually employed here who are doing PhDs or some other kind of credit courses. External to the university, of course, you can take as many courses as you want here for free. So public service announcement there. And with the approval of the dean, and as long as it's not an individual music course, but whatever, that's that. This is for if you're doing a class at SAIT or UC or something like that. And that's been the same since 2010 as well. The Contract Professional Development Fund is an interesting fund because it actually has no money dedicated to it. It's actually a zero fund. It's made out of unspent amounts from different funds, and it goes up to a maximum of $45,000. And currently that is, current staff can apply for, I think up to $1,200 per year. And there's $1,000 that's guaranteed to all the fixed terms. And then of course there's the full-time individual professional development. That's been $1,500 for all full-time faculty per year. So that's per capita. And that was $1,100 in 2010. Okay, so those are our non-benefits. There's of course some other non-benefits benefits like vacation, but I didn't put those in here. Those haven't changed, thankfully. Okay, so I have this pretty extensive overview of the faculty benefits program here. I think I'm going to skip over this particular slide I'll take any questions on it later and skip over to this next one. Oh yeah, skip over. I meant to do this one sort of first. So I'm going to start with this one first. And I have a link here so that I could actually link to it. Oh, it's going to make sure. Let's see if it's going to allow me to do this. Yes, it is. If you have health benefits here, of course, the article allows people to get benefits, contract faculty to get benefits as long as they've been teaching for an extended period of time with a certain amount and so on. I can take questions on that later. Then you get these benefits. One of them is the extended healthcare plan. This is actually from 2020. The employee now only pays 20% of the extended healthcare, and the dental as well, as far as I know. So this is a little bit out of date. So it's gotten a bit better. That extended healthcare, if you get it, there's all kinds of things that were being, what happens to my mentioned here? I go back, oh no, this is not gonna, oh yeah, here, I guess I have to stay here forever. Yeah. I shouldn't have clicked that, should I?
That's okay. You see the PowerPoint at the bottom.
At the bar, I just click on PowerPoint. Oh, okay, that's easy. All right, okay. So, and then if I go back, okay, here I am. All right. So if I go back to my PowerPoint, yeah, a few did you know moments from that extended health coverage is that there's $15,000 there per person over a lifetime for infertility treatment. You can also get vaccines covered at 80%, and also they don't pay to have them actually administered. So you have to shoot them up yourself if you got those skills. Or I don't know, you can maybe get somebody to do it over at the nursing faculty. I don't know. Anyways, there's extended health benefits, and they'll cover things like MRI and so on. Also part of this plan, let's see, whatever. I won't go back there because that was a little awkward. Is what we have now is a health spending account or a personal spending account. You can assign it either way. And that's $1,000 a year. I think it accumulates up to 2 years in a row. And that's you can use that for all kinds of things. I learned today that you can even use it to support your guide dog if you go blind, to pay vet bills and stuff like that. But there's things that you can't use it for as well. But there's all kinds of things that you can use that for, that are not covered by the extended plan. The LAPP is, of course, we pay that 100%. You pay 100% of the cost of that. That's the local authorities pension plan. By the way, it's shared?
LAPP is shared. Yeah. Employer contributes as well as
Oh yeah, what am I thinking then is the 100%?
Long-term disability.
Long-term disability, sorry, I mixed up my L's. So LAPP is shared. Long-term disability, we pay that for 100%, and I think as well as accidental death and dismemberment, we pay 100% of that. And those, by the way, they're only good up to the age of 65 and 70. So don't. Okay, I won't get too macabre in this presentation, but yeah, those are those. LAPP is shared between the employer and the employee. I think it looks like around 50-50. Is that correct? Is that what the agreement says? Yeah. All right, so now the university who created this benefits summary in July of 2020 included some miscellaneous benefits like your rec card, which of course is a benefit. I agree. And parking, which I don't really see as a benefit, but I guess you get the beneficial lots if you're a faculty member, and your participation in the Mount Royal Faculty Association, which is obviously an incredible benefit because we would have none of these agreements without them. So thank you to the MRFA. I think I've said enough about the benefits for now. So yeah. I didn't say anything about the ink blot therapy, which is, you know, one of the benefits that you're guaranteed to have here. It's an online thing. There's a retirement seminar for those of you who think that retirement is an option that will be held over 2 days for retirement planning. That's great. Yeah. And there's ways to get these benefits to continue. So that's good to know as well. Okay, so I have 2 questions submitted in advance. Shall I let
Yeah, you can say that, and whoever feels like answering. We've got Lee here as well.
Okay. Hi, Lee. So the question 1 is for the comp benefits. Somebody would like to know what it would take to get health spending accounts for contract faculty, and whether other PSE institutions have this. Well, I can tell you that you get a health spending account the moment that you qualify for benefits. So if you look at the benefits article, it's 3 semesters of teaching at a certain level, and you will get the benefits that include the health spending account. As far as what other PSEs have for health spending accounts, I'm not sure what's there for contract academics. So and it looks like I should defer question 2 over to Anupam or Kurt.
I wanted to know the comparative salary levels between Alberta universities across all faculties and schools. It's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Unfortunately, we do not get data. Clearly, the data is not publicly available, so we do not get data on how universities in Alberta are doing by faculties, by schools. We do get some of those I showed. We do get like the average salary, median salary data. You can even go by gender, male or female. These are the 2 options I think CAUT and Statistics Canada have, but we do not, unfortunately, have data by faculties, by schools. I do know that the universities in Alberta, PSIs, have to report to Statistics Canada, but they give at the aggregate level, as far as I know. So they don't give data by faculties, by schools. Magnitude of market modifiers, again, there are some universities where the collective agreement talks a little bit about market supplements or market modifier. I believe University of Lethbridge is one of them. There is a small fixed amount, but they use an extensive calculation to calculate that. We do not have any like a market supplement article in this year. What we have is 13.1.4, which gives the university that option to provide additional salary on top of Article 13 salary schedules. Yeah. Any other?
It would be important to note that differential salaries between particular disciplines wouldn't obtain here because we have a grid system. And so once you're on the grid, it doesn't matter what your discipline or profession is, that's where you are. The management is required to inform the association at an aggregate level around any market modifiers that are being given out. We don't know who gets them. We don't know how much. There are some faculties where, or programs where there's fair competition to bring people into the university. So you can imagine what some of those might be. They have changed over time. So depending on what's happening in the broader economy.
Thanks, Lee. Any other question from the floor?